Welcome, everyone, to our first U Day After service. And a special welcome to those of you tuning in from home in your pajamas. We know who you are. You think we look funny in here, we brave few with our jackets and sweaters, but we think you look a bit silly yourselves. Seriously, we hope all are safe and well as we continue to celebrate the season together. We gather as a people who have been tested and tried and who will be tested again, but we also gather as a people who are renewed in hope and courage, daring to love beyond belief and seeking to translate love into action for the sake of a hurting world. So welcome all, and let me not neglect to say what an honor and a pleasure it is for me to be working on this service with the always able Neil Bartholomew and with the equally marvelous Claire Rosenbaum. A pleasure indeed it has been, and Claire will take it from here.
our little tea light from which we light our chalice has been blown out by the wind coming in through the door. So, one moment. Please join in the chalice lighting text which is written in your order of service. This light burns also in our hearts, and it lights our path toward harmony, justice, and hope for all.
Our invocation this morning comes from Howard Thurman, the great mystic and theological poet. These are Thurman's words. When the work of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild nations, to bring peace among sisters and brothers, to make music in the heart. Please feel free at this time to greet one another here in this meeting house, and let's be sure to wave to the camera up in the organ loft so that the folks at home know we miss them and want them back. All right then.
Our reading today is Canto 30 from the poem An Ordinary Evening in New Haven by Wallace Stevens. The last leaf that is going to fall has fallen. The robins are là-bas, the squirrels in tree caves huddle together in the knowledge of squirrels. The wind has blown the silence of summer away. It buzzes beyond the horizon or in the ground, in mud under ponds where sky used to be reflected. The barrenness that appears is an exposing. It is not part of what is absent, a halt for farewells, a sad hanging on for remembrances. It is a coming on and a coming forth. The pines that were fans and fragrances emerge staked solidly in a gusty grappling with rocks. The glass of the air becomes an element. It was something imagined that has been washed away. A clearness has returned. It stands restored. It is not an empty clearness, a bottomless sight. It is a visibility of thought in which hundreds of eyes in one mind see at once.
We come to our time of joys and sorrows. Year's end brings a more than sufficient number of sorrows, and it also brings to us joy. Today we light a candle of condolence and comfort for the family of Guy Ozell, who died unexpectedly on Thursday. We light candles of remembrance and celebration for the lives well lived of Joan Didion and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And we light a candle of hope and healing for our dear friend and music director, Jeff Allard. We remember as well our friend David Lewis experiencing difficulties in prolonged surgery, and Sister Mary Kohler, who struggles with sudden knowledge of a difficult illness. Hope, love, sorrow, and celebration. I invite you now to breathe in and breathe out with me just for a moment, just a few times, as we try to release our stress and anxiety as much as we are able. Deep breath in and out, and again. Breathing in and breathing out. Before we enter our time of silence, please ponder this point with me. If it's true that we live life forward and understand it backward, is that really such a bad deal? I used to think so, but now I wonder. May we learn to give thanks for light we have and not to complain too much about the shadows that remain. May we learn to give thanks always that we have each other to buoy us up and carry us forward from milestone to milestone, and sometimes from grief to grief, and sometimes to moments of shared rapture as we make our way forward on this winding road. Please now reflect in silence, letting your heart speak to you of who and what you hold dearest, who and what you are mourning, who and what you celebrate in particular today. You will hear a chime to close out our time of silence. Good morning, church. It's lovely to be with you after what I hope was for all of you a safe and satisfying Christmas despite everything. And you know what I mean by everything. Actually, in contemplating what to say, I didn't think it would be such a terrific idea to wrench your attention away from the Christmas glow and redirect it toward the New Year's gloom that many are already feeling. Spreading gloom is usually not a good preaching strategy, especially when I happen to know that most of us who gather here, being news hounds by nature, are now so utterly worn down by the torrent of terrifying news that we are in real danger of tuning out news altogether. So I will decline to play Jeremiah this morning. But there's another reason, an even more compelling reason, to bring a message of hope and peace this morning. Our faith traditions give to us a season of rejoicing, because without that rejoicing and without the capacity to sing hallelujah, even in the face of the worst adversity, we cannot be effective peacemakers, and we will never become well-grounded justice seekers. Our wise senior minister said it well in a sermon a couple of months ago. She said that what really ails us is that we're still not giving enough of ourselves, and we still struggle against what I like to call the violence within. That makes it really hard to give more. It makes it really hard to connect better to others, hard to be the people we really want to be, and definitely hard to rejoice with our whole hearts as we are invited to do in this season. As a new year approaches, I want to reflect with you on the special gift that the turn of the year holds out to us. That gift is winter's blunt reminder of evanescence, our own evanescence and the evanescence of almost everything in nature. If you remember anything at all about this sermon, you will remember that I talked about the weather, and I tried to convince you that winter and its harshness is good for the soul. Indeed, that is exactly what I'm up to. I am recommending that we adopt what poet Wallace Stevens calls the mind of winter, which is the capacity to let go, to be diminished for the sake, paradoxically, of being enlarged. Here is Stevens writing about the experience of loss and newfound clarity in a poem called An Ordinary Evening in New Haven. You heard Neil read it earlier, but it bears a second hearing. The last leaf that is going to fall has fallen. The robins are là-bas, the squirrels in tree caves huddled together in the knowledge of squirrels. The wind has blown the silence of summer away. It buzzes beyond the horizon, or in the ground in mud under ponds where the sky used to be reflected. The barrenness that appears isn't exposing. It is not part of what is absent, a halt for farewells, a sad hanging on for remembrances. It is a coming on and a coming forth. The pines that were fans and fragrances emerge, staked solidly in a gusty grappling with rocks. The glass of the air becomes an element. It was something imagined that has been washed away. A clearness has returned. It stands restored. It is not an empty clearness, a bottomless sight. It is a visibility of thought in which hundreds of eyes in one mind see at once. I've been a Wallace Stevens enthusiast all my life because of the way this poet struggled to create an aesthetic so rich and powerful that it could provide spiritual sustenance and begin to replace the corrosive and unnecessary psychic residue of a guilt-drenched American Christianity. And although this Hartford insurance executive by day and mad poet by night was an ugly drunk and a bad bully, I do still love him for the beauty and lushness of his language, coupled with the astringency of his mind. Here is another Stephen's passage on renunciation, and you will hear immediately that this is not any Christian renunciation of earthly pleasure for the sake of the great beyond. Stevens is telling us that the great beyond is right here. This short poem is called Waving Adieu, Adieu, Adieu. In it, Stevens writes, "That would be waving and that would be crying, crying and shouting and meaning farewell, farewell in the eyes and farewell at the center, just to stand still without moving a hand. In a world without heaven to follow, the stops would be endings more poignant than partings, profounder, and that would be saying farewell, repeating farewell, just to be there and just to behold. To be one's singular self, to despise the being that yielded so little, acquired so little, too little to care to turn to the ever-jubilant weather, to sip one's cup and never say a word, or to sleep, or just to lie there still, just to be there, just to be beheld, that would be bidding farewell, be bidding farewell. One likes to practice the thing. They practice enough for heaven. Ever jubilant, what is there here but weather? What spirit have I, except that it comes from the sun? To be one's singular self, to despise the being that yielded so little, to sip one's cup and never to say a word. My friends, how is that not the goal? To be stripped down to the essentials and to welcome the barrenness, the clarity, the freedom and jubilation of a weather that is utterly indifferent to us and our doctrines and dramas and all that distracts us from the smallness we inhabit in the grand scheme of things. That would be heaven, indeed. Elsewhere, Stevens writes, "The greatest poverty is not to live in a physical world, to feel that one's desire is too difficult to tell from despair. Perhaps, after death, the non-physical people in paradise, itself non-physical, may by chance observe the green corn gleaming and experience the minor of what we feel." By now you have surely noticed how the poet keeps saying in different ways that a people consumed with anxiety about the afterlife are likely to be missing out on the paradise that is right here. Now, I doubt that in this Unitarian church, the problem is likely to be a craving for robes and harps and streets of gold. But that does not mean that we aren't still distracted by the unending struggle to build a little heaven for ourselves right here, to grasp the means and materials that help us feel safe and secure in a frightening world. And it is the struggling and the grasping that keep us from what the poet calls the pleasures of merely circulating. Yes, there is certainly a paradox in saying we must find ourselves first diminished in order for our spirits to be lifted and enlarged. But this is a paradox filled with life-changing significance. It is for real, a life-giving paradox. And here, I cannot dodge the issue that is hiding in plain sight, which is the reality of our own death, the ultimate diminishment. Winter is too well known as the time of year when some of the people whom we love and people we have loved take their leave of us. It is also the time when we ourselves feel in our bones the accumulated toll the years have taken. But it's right there in the full consciousness of death, and I would say especially in the consciousness of death, that we find the means for living. We find renewal. We find and taste the very marrow of life itself. I've been talking to you about welcoming finitude as a gift. Finitude is obviously about time, about our limited time here. But it is also about space. I referred earlier to our smallness in the grand scheme of things. Receding into and fully accepting our smallness in this big world is a different form of finitude, a spatial finitude that winter can bring home in beautiful ways. Try, for example, taking a walk in the deepest woods to clear your head. Visit a deserted beach to watch and hear the waves rolling in. Consider the crows in their endless journeys and try to imagine the world from their perspective. In winter, I sometimes come across a highly vocal congregation. I think they're called murders, a highly vocal murder of crows in the trees at the top of Prospect Hill in the late afternoon. And I always wonder, what are these crows talking about? What are they saying? This month's Harper's Magazine features a long and dense article on trauma. It's heavy going, but I persevered and I got through it. The writer's main contention is that pop psychologists and literary theorists have managed to render the term trauma almost meaningless, whereas there is a different and simpler way to think about the distress we experience in an unhappy world. The notion the writer brings forward is that for 2 centuries life has been speeded up enormously, first with trains, then with automobiles and airplanes. Our natural rhythms were badly disrupted by the acceleration. And during these same 2 centuries, we humans have also been displaced from our rootedness in the natural world, thanks first to photography and now to our near total immersion in the artificial world, the stress-inducing matrix of electronic media. There's no sense there of distance, of perspective within that digital matrix. We are both everywhere and nowhere. How can this not damage brains that evolved when our lives were bounded and linked by the natural world, linked to, say, a particular cabin, a field, and the stream flowing through it? How can this radical displacement not damage our spirits? We need to disconnect. We need to let our eyes take in the bare field and the wandering stream, the distant trees, in order to be healed. Our mortality and our smallness in the grand scheme of things is not a curse, but a blessing. It teaches us to be kind to ourselves, kind to all living things, kind even to time's ever-flowing stream. As Wallace Stevens writes, one likes to practice the thing. One learns to sip one's cup and never say a word. And as for kindness, I read recently that science is finally catching up with what religion has long taught. There is research to indicate that simply being kind unlocks good energy in and among those to whom we show kindness. Imagine that. We do know, we have always known, that kindness begins with humility. The fallen leaves will humble you and me. The way we cannot understand the knowledge of squirrels will humble you and me. The mighty flowing river of mortality, yes, that will do it. Meditating on that will bring tears, and those tears will bring knowledge, and that knowledge will save us. It will soothe our troubled souls if we will let it. There is power and there is healing in the consciousness of limits, of finitude. Suffering and loss, the trees standing bare, the flowing river now scrimmed with winter ice, they teach us to love what matters. What matters is the divine love that surges in and through all. What matters is what Dr. King called the single garment of a shared human destiny. What matters is the divinity of each and every blessed thing, right down to the tiniest mosses and lichens that still have so much to teach us. If there was ever a season to learn to surrender our too needy and too greedy way of operating, surely the very end of the year is that season. May we all start practicing. May we all let go of the violence within. May we take time to receive the mystery and beauty that surround us always. And in that properly humbled way, may we begin with newly purified hearts to heal the violence without. Amen.
We are a spiritual community who govern ourselves through democratic process and who support ourselves through our own collective generosity. We take responsibility for how we conduct ourselves as individuals and as a community, and love and generosity are among our core spiritual values. Our annual pledges are the expression of generosity which provides most of the financial support for the mission of this church. And our weekly offering is a symbolic extension of that support. We invite you to join in the spirit of love and generosity. And for those of you watching at home, you can go to our website and go where it says give and go to give it to First Unitarian, and there's a form that you can get to where you can make a donation online. I'm hoping that an option still available to you is the option that was put up on Christmas Eve, which was to make a donation to the Minister's Discretionary Fund. The Minister's Discretionary Fund is different from the Pastor's Fund. The Pastor's Fund is very limited to specifically people in emergency need of food and shelter. The Minister's Discretionary Fund is an opportunity to give varieties of kinds of aid to people both inside and outside of our congregation who just need something to attend to a specific need at a specific time. And it is, as the name implies, at the discretion of our minister to give them that aid at that time. The only source of funding for the Minister's Discretionary Fund is the Christmas Eve offertory. And since things were not only disrupted in that we had no one here in person, but also disrupted in the sense that one of our Christmas Eve services did not go quite as planned even online, the income this year to the minister's discretionary fund is likely to be greatly reduced. So please take the opportunity, if you're at home, to, if that option is still available to you, to make a donation to the minister's discretionary fund. And to all of us, whether here in person or at home, think about sending a check to the church office with an indication on it that it is for the minister's discretionary fund, and perhaps be particularly generous because we know that it may be underfunded this year. I will be doing that. But in any case, the offering for the mission and vision of this church is now to be gratefully received, and thank you for all that you give, and all that you do, and all that you are. We have just a couple of invitations today. One is that people who ordered poinsettias for Christmas Eve, who, if you happen to be here today and you ordered one of them, please feel free to take one with you. Or echoing a conversation that I heard earlier before the service, if you are here today and you know someone who ordered one of the poinsettias and you will be seeing them, or might create an opportunity to see them soon, perhaps you can take one for them. The other important announcement is next week our service will again be a guest in our pulpit. It will be Pastor Lori Smalls, who, in addition to her leadership in a number of organizations doing wonderful work in the community, she is the pastor-elect of Union Baptist Church in New Bedford. She will be speaking on the topic of basic humanity, basic guiding principles for humanity, and what we should expect from each other. And we will have special music also, somebody she's bringing with her to provide music to match her service. So, and this one will also be, you know, the opportunity to come in person next week. So if you feel safe doing so, please come next week or watch it online.
You can tell I don't have the choreography of taking the mask off and on down yet, but I'll work on it. Can we have a moment of appreciation for Neil and for Claire? I am telling you that it is a joy to be working with them and to feel the music. In my opinion, the music makes the service. And would you now receive this benediction? As the daylight begins to return in this hemisphere, may you carry the light and warmth of this festive season out into the new year, bringing greater hope and joy wherever you go, bringing comfort to the lost and justice to the least. An old gospel song puts it well: walk in the light, the beautiful light, where the dewdrops of mercy are shining so bright. Shine all around you by day and by night. Walk in the beautiful light. Amen.
Please join in the unison chalice extinguishing reading in your order of service. We carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.